it took a Herculean act of strength to get up, go upstairs, and let myself fall apart in front of my own family, my sisters, my parents. Like, I can't tell you why. It's just, there's something about grief that is throwing elbows and it's like, hey, you should be alone. Nobody's going to understand this. Why don't you hug your pain? You just lost somebody real important to you. I know, I got an idea, says grief. We're going to show the world how important they were by showing everybody that you can't move forward without that person. So let's curl up in a ball, let's go in the corner, and if anybody tries to help you, you be inconsolable, you just hug your pain tighter.
Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group, and I'm back for another episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we like to break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean, and we talk about what you might do about them. I have a great show for you today. First, my partner and our Chief Research Officer, Stacey Harris, is co-hosting with me today. You know her as the host of Spilling the Tea on HR Tech. Hi, Stacey.
Hey, everyone.
And joining the two of us is Jason Seiden. Jason is the co-founder of Comfort Communications, and Stacey and I have been looking forward to having a conversation with him. Welcome, Jason.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this myself.
Well, I appreciate both of you making time for this today. And like I said, I've definitely been looking forward to it because it's a really important conversation. I think it's the stuff that we don't talk about. The topic today is going to be grief in the workplace. And so before you disconnect and say, oh, I don't know if I can handle that, trust me, I had a conversation with Jason a couple months ago, and we were both laughing and crying. So you can make it through this podcast, and I think you'll appreciate it and be the better for it. And I want to talk about what Comfort Communications is doing about grief in the workplace. So I think it's a really important topic. Does that sound like a good plan to you guys?
Absolutely.
Sounds great. And I've brought tissues if anybody needs them, so it's okay.
All right. Well, let's get into the huddle then. So Jason, before we get into questions, tell us a little bit about Comfort Communications, kind of your mission, how you got here. I know this is truly a passion project for you, and I think knowing that is an important part of what you do.
Yeah, thank you. So I so appreciate all of this, including the setup. I think it's so important. Our mission is to normalize this conversation. If you've chosen to be born, there's only one other life event that you're guaranteed to share with everybody else, right? Like, so the idea that it's this scary boogeyman that we can't talk about it, no, it's as natural as it gets, and normalizing it is important for a variety of reasons that we'll talk about. There's a few things that make comfort special, but I think before we talk about what comfort does, I want to share just one part of my story. We've all had tragedy. There's no misery Olympics. I don't think any one person's worse than anybody else. What I want to share is a moment of joy that I had a couple days after the worst thing that ever happened to me. And, and just so that people know kind of where I come from with this and how I'm anchored. 6 years ago, I lost my daughter. Absolutely horrible. Don't imagine it. Don't try. Dark, dark place. But what really shocked me was a couple days after that happened, I had the most profound moment of joy I've ever had in my life. And it came out of nowhere. It was just this feeling that here's this girl who extended my capacity for joy when she was born beyond what I thought possible. And with her death, extended my capacity for grief beyond what I thought possible. And in that moment, I felt nothing but appreciation for this human who had given me more ability to live my life. And that appreciation, obviously you don't hold that for a long time, right? But it really has served as a true north really since then. And I think it's helped me have a more shallow and shorter journey than a lot of other people have. Comfort is a company I don't know how to help people replicate what happened, but I do know that in the days that followed that tragedy, I was surrounded by wonderful people who kind of put me in a cocoon and then got out of my way. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if we knew how to be there for people, but also got out of their way so that they could have that journey and we weren't tripping over ourselves and causing them to trip over us. And I'll just say, if you work at a company, you've probably seen the company trip over itself, right? Your colleagues have probably tripped over themselves and gotten in your way. And so the idea behind Comfort is, hey, let's normalize this conversation around grief. Let's make it easier for people to do the little things that they want to do, be there in those little moments so that they're not getting in the way of their colleague who's going through a thing. And then maybe more people can have shorter, shallower journeys through this horrific event. But their team becomes a source of strength and a source of support and a source of I actually like, this is good, as opposed to one more thing they gotta go see a therapist about.
Yeah, I like
kind of the origin.
Your comment about companies or organizations, because we do have sort of this tendency to have an expectation of the organization, but organizations don't console you. They don't connect with you. It's individuals within the organization. And I think that's one of the reasons why an organization's culture is so critical to this process. What is the culture that's embedded in this organization? And everybody's different. Everybody responds to things differently. But this is one of those areas that I think a lot of people are timid, afraid to step into. Like, what do I say? I don't, and I know personally from personal experience, when this would happen, I was one of those people that just didn't know the right words. So chose maybe to say nothing, or, the typical obligatory, I'm so sorry for your loss.
So there's a lot to what you just said. So in the years that preceded any kind of launch, I talked to pretty much everybody I talked to has a story, and there were some consistent themes with what people were sharing in terms of where the gaps were, right? So we all know that people in organizations don't do a good job with this, but if you're going to do something about it, you have to be able to get underneath that and figure out why. And there were a whole bunch of things that showed up. It turned out that there was a pretty simple path, right? We came up with a solution that sort of lined up all the dots. So I'll start with that, and then I'll kind of go back through some of the things that you shared, like where companies mess this up. What Comfort Communications provides is not therapeutic, but it's a communication protocol. And it's something that HR can use to really do three things very simply. Number one, help the team, activate the team to take care of their teammate. So here's what to say, right? Number two, come up with an operating model. How are we going to deal with this? There's a lot of different forms of grief. Maybe I've lost a loved one. Maybe you've lost an employee. Maybe someone's getting divorced. Maybe there's a mass weather event, or, heaven forbid, a violent event. There's miscarriages. There's layoffs. There's all kinds of things. So to be able to have an operating model that's 80%, 90% ready, where all you have to do is customize it for that moment, rather than in a moment when you're totally stressed, come up with the whole thing. That's the second thing that Comfort Comms provides, is those operating models. And then the third thing is a way to track what's going on, so that as you have people in the organization who learn about what happened later, they can actually join the conversation already in progress. And those are the three things that Comfort does. And hold that aside for a second. Why do companies screw this up? There's a bunch of good stuff that you shared. One, people don't know what to say. Absolutely. It's a cold prompt. I don't know where to go with this. And providing people with a head start on that, certainly something that folks need. Secondly, there needed to be some kind of organization. Not only do people generally not know what to say, they don't know what's happening. There's a natural inclination for leaders and HR to say, oh, this happened to this person. We have to throw a bunch of resources at that person. And that's a conversation, because when you have when you're grieving, the last thing you can do is go through an EAP and figure out which of your mental health apps you're going to go sign. That's not happening. But we forget that we have an entire team of people who are relying on this individual who's now about to go absent for a while, and they're still under pressure to perform. There was a responsibility to them to make sure that they can continue to perform. Some of them are going to be personal friends with this individual, right? So that was just a huge gap. Like, there was nobody thinking about the team or the manager or the executives involved. And I just kept hearing story after story about how that led to problems. And I think we're all familiar with the kind of, the manager who just calls up and is like, when are you coming back to work? That's horrible. But I'm hearing about HR where, a system sends an automated note that you have to go change beneficiaries, but there's no personal note to say, hey, you're about to go get this automated note. It's going to feel like a kick in the teeth. And I just want you to know I'm here and I can help you through it. That call is missing. I'm hearing about executives calling individual contributors thinking they're doing a great thing. But then the IC has no idea how to interact with an exec. So they're trying to be with their family. And instead, they're off in a corner, maybe with a brother or a cousin saying, okay, I have to call my CEO back. So help me get my game face on and tell me what to say. And so that lack of organization, that lack of knowing what's going on was a second huge bucket of problems that we were seeing. And then the kind of the third and fourth go together. How do you share this with the rest of the organization? And how do you maintain somebody's desire for privacy? And from an HR perspective, there were a lot of folks who just go, I don't know what kind of privacy they're going to want, so we're done. And from an HR perspective, I get that. But from a comms perspective, you can break that down and say, well, what kind of privacy? They don't want anyone to know that anything happened. They are okay with people knowing what happened. They just don't want to talk about it. They don't want the details shared, or they're actually okay with everything. They just need some time before they get the onslaught of everybody reaching out. Those are all privacy, but they're all different forms. So helping HR go behind the headline, figure out, okay, what exactly are we dealing with and why, right? And then back to the operating model. If that person says, I don't want anyone to know because they're private or because they don't trust their manager, so we got to figure out like what the real issue is. So those two things, like how do I let the team know? How do I let the broader team know? And how do I manage this person's privacy? Like those things are linked. And so by coming up with this comms model of helping people know what to say so that they're activated, they can take care of their teammate, making sure that there's a plan that can be shared with the individual and a manager and a team and an extended team, and then, a repository for information so that as people come late to the party, they can catch up and they're not constantly bringing this grieving person back to square one with the same questions. That grouping together really we found we were able to address a lot of those places where companies get hung up when they try and take care of somebody in grief.
Jason, I want to call out one of the first things you had mentioned there, which is the communications, because I think we undervalue the communications conversation. Like all the other things you talked about, I think, are things we're afraid of, but the communications piece is happening whether we know it or not, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So you had mentioned, people getting announcements or communications from the systems, right, about benefits. I think that was the story that I shared with you. When you first posted on LinkedIn what you were doing, I'm fairly private about my personal life, right? And so a lot of people don't know, but my husband passed in 2016 due to cancer. And so I had been off for about 2 months going through the process of helping him pass. And then my first communications, and it was due to no point with the HR professional, because the HR team actually did what I think they thought was the right thing to do. They went in and changed everything in the system for me. They just automatically did it. But the first communication I got from the system when I opened up from what at that point in time I think was PeopleSoft was, as a widow, now you need to go through and change these things. And
right.
So I laugh because it's that macabre humor, right? That you're like, there's no other way to handle that, because I can remember breaking down at my desk. And I think that's the challenge, is that we oftentimes don't realize is that in the absence of not having a plan or not having a communication strategy, something is happening, whether we want it to or not. And that was the piece I think that hit me most when we were talking about our experiences and our backgrounds, was that so few organizations want to deal with this because it feels too much, too big, something that they feel like they can't actually get their arms around. And what I love about what you guys have done is you've broken it down into manageable chunks, right?
But yeah, I think it's funny. A lot of organizations, they kind of know they're bad at this, but they don't know the impact. And, your story has been echoed by other folks who I've talked to, and, and HR people who just like are wringing their hands. Like, we don't even know what the system is sending out to people. So like, no one's done the audit to go, here's what's happening, and we can get in front of it. I think about how much a company invests in its culture and the employee experience and employer branding and employee engagement and tools to reduce absenteeism and all of it, right? A lot of that is there simply because the companies are not showing up, right? They're not allowing the employees to show up for each other in moments that matter. And right, if you've been through grief, you know that your world gets real binary, real fast. The company's culture, you're either there for me or you're not. And if you're not, we're done. And I'm not coming back. And at that moment, the clock, not only does the clock start ticking for me as an individual, but everybody I talk to, I've checked out. So either they go, well, this person who I really enjoyed working with is checked out. And over time, they kind of forget that I lost somebody. And now they're thinking, well, when good people leave, maybe I should be thinking of, right? There's like this whole ripple effect that happens when somebody witnesses a colleague checking out for these reasons. And it's very, very difficult to come back from that. So it's not just that this stuff happens, it's that the impact of it, we're measuring other stuff. We're measuring downstream impact, but you can trace it back to these moments that matter. And so it's really important to get them right. And I think now more than ever, it's more important and harder to get them right too. I know I'm rambling. Thank you so much for letting me I'm so passionate about this. Like just jump in and cut me off at any time. COVID and the whole thing that we've been through the last couple of years really has had an impact on us. And, on the one hand, we've got people coming into the workforce that they don't have the skills, and those of us who are in the workforce, we're a little rusty. So we want to be empathetic, but we kind of forgot how. We lost 2 years of practice, and the other thing that happened is we're doing more like this, so we're doing more video work. Well, I don't know exactly where you guys are, but you're in my house, I know it's blurred out for you, but I'm seeing your faces and I'm seeing my house behind you. There's an intimacy that we have created, even in a professional environment. And the idea of professionalism needs to catch up to that. And I think we're all feeling it. It's not okay anymore to just say, look, you got some personal stuff going on. We're going to keep this relationship professional. Let's call it, right? I've seen you. You've seen me. Like you're in my home, whether you want to be or not. So for you to then just say, oh yeah, we're professional, we're not showing up, it hits me in a different place that I wasn't anticipating and maybe didn't have the words for, but it's very, very real. And so that combination of things get binary. We may not have the skills to really read things right, but it's more intense than it's ever been because of the intimacy that we've created. We need this. We absolutely have to address this now more than ever. And oh, by the way, with AI, you're going to end up with fewer employees and more leverage on the few that you have. Turnover is going to be harder to deal with than it's ever been. There's this huge confluence of factors that just makes this imperative at the moment.
Yeah.
I'll stand down from the soapbox now.
Well, you're very passionate about it. So we love that. And, it's a lot to digest, but I love that, not everything's a process, but in this case, there are things that can be put in place to make it smoother for people. Stacey said something to me on a call the other day when we were talking about having this call, and she said, grief isn't linear. I'm grieving this week, right? Because of the passing and the funeral and all the things that kept me busy. Maybe I'm not even grieving that hard this week because I'm so busy trying to deal with the issue that I haven't even had a chance to process it. So the grief starts later, but then it also happens over time too. And the things that you have to deal with, right? Whether it is a death or a divorce or something else, there's a lot of things happening in people's lives, and no, you can't, worry about that 24/7, but you can be there for people when they need to, take those steps. And
So
I
right.
want to hear more about the process, but it's
Well,
good to
but
just talk about it, right? I mean,
right. Well, and you're on it. Like there's a lot to the process that's not very complicated. It gets complex because, from an HR standpoint, I mean, there's a lot of conversations to track and to confirm. And, before this person reaches out, let's confirm that that piece of information was collected. But at the core, we're talking about being thoughtful and just good to each other. You know what HR can do? HR can look at the calendar and go, oh, you know what? We've got a manager offsite coming up. This person's going to be at a table, and half the table is going to be her team, and half the table is going to be new people. Let's make sure the icebreaker isn't, what did you do this weekend? Where it becomes a round robin of, I went here with my family, I did this with my family, and this person's going to get here, and she's going to be like, now what do I say? Do I break the hearts of these 5 people who I'm meeting for the first time, or do I give these 5 teammates permission to ignore what happened to me because I'm about to put on the face and say, hey, I'm okay? What HR can take a look at that and go, let's make sure that doesn't happen. And those things go so far to just helping people feel seen. We're all adults. We know that the work doesn't stop. We know we're not operating at our best. But if I get a call from somebody and that person's able to say, hey, Jason, Teri here, I talked to Stacey. She said last week was a rough week. I'm just checking in. How you doing? How's this week? Is anything better? Do you need anything? Can I do anything for you? Probably not. But I know 2 things. Not only that Teri reached out, but that Teri and Stacey connected and are looking out for me. And what a difference versus hearing from everybody just, how you doing today? What happened? How you doing today? What happened? Are you kidding me? Like, I work with 100 people. I got to go through this 100 times. That's why people clam up. So there's a lot so that the process we have, like helping people know what to say and the operating model, we've really thought through, like, what are a lot of these little interactions that are likely going to happen? How do we activate the team? How do we keep them aware of what else is happening so that everyone's just taking a small action, a small thoughtful action. And for the person who's being impacted, it adds up to, thank you for showing up for me, company. That felt good. Like, there's a lot here you couldn't deal with, but you were able to clear the path, and I can go deal with my stuff and, maybe find a moment of peace, if not of joy, and that's where it starts. Like, let's just be human to each other.
Jason, you had mentioned that, a portion of this is also that the way in which the team is informed. I thought that was a really intriguing piece when we started talking about this, because I think there are some tools out there that maybe will say, here's some communication models, right? I've seen some of that before. EAPs try and support some of that. But like you said, when in the midst of sort of the pain, most people have no idea about how to activate any of the things the company has available. I have that conversation on a constant battle with a lot of organizations, like, well, no one's using our EAP or a mental health system, like, because you haven't really figured out how to make it accessible when they need it. But I do think this idea of understanding what the team is going through and making sure that team is informed is really powerful. I know Teri and I have had this conversation when we've had people in our team who have lost team members and their family members. Like, how do we make sure that everything's balanced, so not only do they feel like the work's getting done, but that team feels like they're being supported with what they're having to do, right? And I know when you come back, sometimes there's different dynamics, because now someone who was taking on your role for maybe quite a bit of time is now being asked to step back. Like, how have you dealt, and how are you guys sort of addressing some of that in some of the conversations you're having?
So the way I look at the world is, you can tell people what to do or how to do it, but not both. And like, a good manager will either tell you what to do or how and leave the what to you, right? And with Comfort, we've taken a similar approach. We start with how. There's a lot of what that we're just not going to know, but we can make sure the how is smooth, and we can make sure it's human, and we can make sure there's empathy there. I think HR and organizations, there's an over reliance on telling people what to do. We try and hire smart people, but then we go and tell them what to do. It's like, why'd you bring me in? I didn't need my college degree if you're just going to tell me what you want me to do. So the idea of, for instance, we say, like, people don't know what to say. Let's tell them what to say. We're not really telling them what to say. We're giving them ideas of how to express what they want to express. And when you look at the team, there's a lot of that's going on. We know there's going to be tough conversations. We know that performance is likely going to be an issue. So how do you address performance? Well, it might be by having a process where either HR or somebody else on a project team is deputized to connect with that grieving person and find out the truth, where the manager is not instantly involved, because it's not safe for someone who knows they're not operating at 100% to share that with a person who could fire them for not operating at 100%. So we have to have that conversation. We've got to figure out how to share the workload to get this stuff done. But how is it going to happen? Does it go through a peer? Is HR involved? Can the manager handle it? They just need training. There's some how questions that we can start to get at that buy an organization space and time to get the better answer about what they've got to do. And that's how we think about it.
Yeah, really powerful.
Yeah. People have to feel like that there's openness. Like, I could call somebody and tell them this and I won't be penalized for it, right? Because, the stress already of whatever it is they've been experiencing is only compounded by the fact that they know they're not getting the job done. And, that adds just a whole nother layer of stress.
And it can be humiliating. Let's just put it on the table. Like, grief sucks. One of the most brilliant things that my co-founder and wife did was, she's like, grief can be nowhere. This is not about grief. No one wants to touch it. Even those who have been through it, like, yeah, once was enough, go away, right? Yeah. It's got to be about comfort. Like, it has to be something that people can lean into and take care of. And because grief is awful, right? One of the hardest things that I did, right? I lost my daughter, right? You can imagine, like, all the people who are talking, like, you can picture the conversation I've had. Everybody coming up to me, I don't know what to say. I can't imagine. I'm like, dude, do not imagine. Like, not for one, like, go tell me that you gave your kids an extra hug, right? Like, I'm about to spend so much time and money in therapy to get out of this hole. Why would you try and picture the hole? It's not like, this is kind of gross, taste it. Or like, yeah, it was a scary movie. Like, go away, just keep away from this. I had extended family, and my sisters, and they all fly in. I got my whole family in the house. And you know what I did? I went in the basement where I could be alone, and I curled up on the couch and I could hear them all upstairs. And it took a Herculean act of strength to get up, go upstairs, and let myself fall apart in front of my own family, my sisters, my parents. Like, I can't tell you why. It's just, there's something about grief that is throwing elbows, and it's like, hey, you should be alone. Nobody's going to understand this. Why don't you hug your pain? You just lost someone real important to you. I know, I got an idea, says grief. We're going to show the world how important they were by showing everybody that you can't move forward without that person. So let's curl up in a ball. Let's go in the corner. And if anybody tries to help you, you be inconsolable. You just hug your pain tighter. And it's not a whisper. That is what grief yells at you. And so the journey that you're going through to overcome that, you just soften the voice to be able to deal with it. That's personal and unique. But on the other hand, we're all humans, so we're not that different. We're kind of like snowflakes. Like, we're all going through that journey. So the idea of knowing this is what the journey is going to be like. And as a team, we can anticipate that. And when we talk to this individual who's grieving, we know a few things. We might not know the specifics, and we might not know where they are in the journey, but we know the journey. Now you can start to come up with some templates and some plans where you don't have to wait on the idiosyncratic part. You can focus on that 80-90% that's common to all humans and be like, look, I don't know where you're at, but I have to admit, like, I know this is not a good time. Like, I know so you don't have to worry about calling me back. This phone call is for you. Don't worry about little things. Hey, I know you said you're coming back to work. I know you're gung ho. I know you want to take your mind off stuff. I just want you to know, like, we all get it. and nobody expects you to be 100. Like, you're going to have a bad day when you don't expect it. Call me. I'm here. When it happens, I'll be here. But just flag the stuff that we know is going to happen, normalize those conversations, and then remember that. So when that person actually reaches out, you're like, yeah, not a big deal. Knew this was coming. Let's talk about it. What do you need?
Yeah. That normalization, I think, and the statement of what is the fact, right? I think is so powerful in what you just stated, because I think so many times we're afraid to actually state what is, right? It is truly so much more about, I just want to make everybody feel better. I want to fix it, right? And I think the best thing that I ever had anyone do was just say, this sucks. This sucks. There's nothing else to say but this sucks, right? It's that reality check that makes a big difference, right?
So my manager, so the company I worked for when this went down was a great place to work. And I have so much respect for the culture team, and the grief was also a gap. My manager didn't have the tools to deal, and I'm a good person. There's no ill will, but the only time that they asked me how I was doing were the 5 times between the event and, a year later, when there was a strategic conversation to have, and they wanted to make sure I was up for it. I'm like, can I just get a text? Like, can you just ask me how I'm doing? Right? And then I had somebody who I didn't even know who found out about it, and they called me and they said, you know what? I just want you to know, I've been thinking about this. If I read about you and you've become an axe murderer, I want you to know it's okay. Like, you just get a buy in my mind. I can't, like, what you've dealt with is horrible. And I think I'd probably be an axe murderer if that happened to me. So if you need anything, and no matter how weird it is, call me. And if you get yourself in trouble, just know, like, I'm still a safe phone call. That made me laugh my ass off. And right. I mean, it's so bold. It's so out of left field, but it was right. I mean, the stuff going through my head was like, not that I was murderous, but I'm like, it wasn't the Henry, like, oh my gosh, it was somebody just stepped right into it. I'm like, yeah, I spent like 5 minutes trying to figure out what's going on through your head, and I can't. Better you than me, right? But but you get a buy with me if you can't handle it. That normalization is very powerful.
Yeah, I think just the outreach, regardless of what it is, just whether you want to talk about it or whether you just want to talk about something else. And I'm sure you guys probably thought a lot about putting the word communications in the name of your organization. But I mean, at the end of the day, that's really what this is all about. Keeping those lines of communication open, because once they close, you shut down. Right. And then you become less and less able to ask for help or talk about some of these things with people. And I was thinking about your conversation about going in your basement. Obviously when my father passed away, we were all at the house, and so there's a lot of people around, right? And after they took him, I found my mom in the bedroom on the bed, just curled up in a ball, right? She just wanted to be alone in there. And you just don't know what to say. But you've got to, bring them back into the fold. Stacey, I need your Kleenexes. It's because I didn't bring any.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it took one act of willpower after another, personally, and it also took some reframing. I had some people around me who pulled me forward. And, for me, I mean, sometimes the goal is just, can you get out of bed, right? You put your feet on the floor and you stand up. You're like, I won the day. Back to bed, right? Like that happens. But I had to recalibrate the way that I saw people. All those people who were just annoying the hell out of me when I just wanted to be alone. I'm like, no. These are like the nurses who are checking on me after a concussion every hour. And it's annoying, and all I want to do is sleep, but they're keeping me alive. That's what's happening here. There's a custom in Judaism where you sit Shiva. And a lot of people know the phrase, you're sitting Shiva. But it's beautiful. And the way that it works is when there's a loss, the person who who had the loss, they do a couple things. Now, if you're real religious, you cover all your mirrors, so you can't even see yourself, which is actually surprisingly more effective than you think. Most people I know don't do that, but it's part of it. But then you kind of open your house and your friends all come to you for like a week, and they bring the food and they bring the community, and your house is alive and noisy and messy, and it's aggravating, and you don't have a minute to yourself. And then by the time everyone leaves a week later, some of the initial trauma has passed. You're in a better place to deal with it. And you have a week's worth of memories of being surrounded by your friends and family when you finally have 5 minutes to yourself to curl up into a ball. And there's no therapy going on. I mean, you guys have families, you know how dysfunctional most of them are, right? Like it's a complete goat rodeo, right? But that mess and that idea of not being alone and knowing that you've been thought of and seen goes so far. And, you know, and then we're all on our own journey. Like some people, you're going to hug your pain for a long time. Others don't want to hug it at all. And let's move forward. But at least that foundation's in place. And so Lisa and I, we tried to capture a lot of that sentiment in Comfort, right? And modify it, right? This is not family. This is a business. So different rules of engagement. But the idea of letting someone know they're being thought of appropriately, like being present in an appropriate way. I see you as a human. I recognize the pain you're going through, and I'm going to give you the fist bump, hug, wink, not just enough to let you know that I've thought about you. Or I'm going to say something that you know I'm coordinating with other people, like we're taking care of things. It's very powerful. And then when that person comes back, they're coming back to a network that was thinking about them actively the whole time. So, you know, whether they're in the bedroom curled up or they want people with them, they're able to hear what's going on in the other room, so to speak. And so they know, okay, I needed to be on that bed alone, but my team was still on the other side of that door at any time. That totally changes a dynamic and makes that reintegration easier. It makes it safer to keep those lines of communication open. Makes it safer and easier to get off the bed and go back in the other room. You know, and I find it interesting that we all like to be unique and completely distinct as humans until we're talking astrology or generations. Then we can't get in the box fast enough. And when it comes to grief, the more I talk to people, the more I realize this is a box. Like, let's get in it together. And if we can find ways to grab the points of commonality, we want to know we're being thought of. We want to be seen as human. We want people to recognize, yeah, we know the work's going to happen.
Yeah.
Let's take a gap, right? That's when those little things are missing, it's almost irrecoverable. But when they're there, then we get it, right? Life is filled with administrative hassle. This is going to be a big one.
Jason, we hear the term right now, it's getting kind of common to hear psychological safety, sort of inside of work environments. There's a lot of tools being built around this, the idea of psychological safety. And can you talk a little bit about sort of, as well as mental health, wellness, all of those things, how this maybe is different from some of that, which I think, you know, you hate to say it, but it does feel a little bit like, you know, the fad sometimes, right? Like, I feel like what you're doing is at a deeper level than some of those kind of conversations, but I'd be interested in how you feel those are connecting.
So there's a couple parts to this. One, we did frame this up as a protocol, right? So this is very pragmatic. It's paint by numbers. I think HR's got a lot of good ideas, but I mean, let's call it what it is. HR does not usually go far enough with the solution set. You know, it's like, oh, we'll train people and then they know how to handle it. Nope. They haven't practiced it. It's not there when they need it. You know, we're going to put together a succession plan. Okay. But plans change. And it's just, so we wanted something that took the training and brought it in just in time. And that's already an accommodation to the business, right? We're taking care of the team. Stuff has to happen. We're going to make it happen. We're making it happen in a psychologically safe way, but we're not taking time out from work to do the therapy, to find the kumbaya, to do an offsite, to do training. This is going to happen in real time while the wheels are turning. So that pragmatism, that's a part of it. One of the other things that I'll tell you is I do think in the US, we like to push the pendulum way too far in one direction or another. And right now we live in a split world. We have two pendulums swinging, and oh my God, it's a mess. So one of our goals with this was really to find a way to bring people together. So I'm going to share a story to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about. I've got a bunch of kids in college. One of them had a thing happen, as we all did in college. And like, I got to make an appointment with my shrink and talk through this. I'm like, great. And they're telling me what it was. And then they asked, like, how did you deal with this? Right. I mean, it was very clear that I had a similar experience. You know, we all need our heart broken once in our life. And I'm like, back in the 80s and 90s, you'd find an album or you'd make a mixtape of sad songs. You'd listen to it like forever. And at some point it dawned on you that someone actually sang your feelings and the radio was playing it. So other people are, so I'm not alone. And then you're like, oh, I guess I'm normal. Like, it sucks, but it's also normal to have this sucky thing happen. And you got on with your life. I think a lot of the programs we have are missing that component. We take a time out from life to deal with the psychological safety, but we're not connecting it back into our lives. And so it was really important to us when we developed Comfort Communications to say, life is happening. We're going to take care of people, but we're going to take care of them in their lives. Nothing's going to stop. They're going to do it. And then if they want to think about it later, the connections will click and they'll go, oh, this is why that template was a good template. This is why it actually was nice that Stacey called and then Teri called and then Jason called. But in the moment, it's, Stacey, you're making this call. We need this information and I need it by the end of the day. And that's how we sort of bridge that need for psychological safety and doing it within the realm of an organization that has a profit motive.
Who'd have thought we'd be talking about mixtapes on this call?
Right. I can't think of anything better. Right? I mean, it's like
and then you didn't get so far as to when you finally got so sick of that mixtape, you took it outside and like crushed it with the baseball bat. It's like, I'm over this. Yes. Like, I can't listen to this anymore.
Well, you know what? But that's part of what's in, we're kind of, I'm talking a little bit, more strategically around the need and sort of how we address it. But when you get down to it, you're exactly right. Companies don't have any rituals. And so having that operating plan and being able to instill just a simple little ritual, something happened to a colleague. We're going to do a huddle at the end of the day for 5 minutes. I'm going to tell you what's going on. You're probably going to learn nothing, but we're going to take 5 minutes and we're going to put some intention to it. That's a ritual. And then to be able to close that out and say, all right, we've been doing this, daily for a week and then weekly for a month and then monthly for a quarter. It's time to end it and get back on to work. It provides that structure and that closeout. And it's really no different than, unfortunately probably burning the tape back in the day, but ecologically safe. We'll just say we smashed it. That happened too.
Yeah. I think about like a lot of the culture programs and that have been going on over the years. And this is almost never a topic included in that conversation. So, yeah. I think HR doesn't have to own everything, but when it comes to people and it comes to the ability to understand your workforce, I think they're an important driver and an important collaborator on this process. And we could probably talk for another hour, but maybe we'll have we'll come back for a second show to talk about really how to do some of this stuff. For now, do you have one thing that you can leave the audience with today that might help them start to work on this as, and I normally would say a problem, but it's part of your attraction and retention. Like you want to retain your employees. It's part of them being part of the organization. And it also has a huge impact on your organization's productivity. So it's important for everybody to win in this space, right? So if there's one thing you could leave the audience with today, what would that be?
So let's start small, right? So I heard time and time again, how you doing today? And I'm like, okay, one of you read Sheryl Sandberg's book, which is amazing. And then you shared that knowledge out. Can we get some creativity in here, right? So let's just build on that body of knowledge. If you've got somebody where something happened to them think about, let's start with this. Think about comfort as opposed to grief support. Keep it where it doesn't trigger you. You are providing comfort. Anyone can provide comfort. You're talking to the person, it's a verbal hug. Ask about them, and simple things you can do. Ask what their name is. Instead of asking how they died or what happened, ask about what they stood for. Ask about, is there a favorite memory that you keep playing on repeat? Are there songs I should be looking out for? Maybe they're going to send a message to you, like what music or what movie, or how are they reaching you? Anything to help keep the person alive in the memory of the person who's grieving is going to help. Start by asking what their name is. And look, I want to tell you not to be afraid of grief. I mean, it's hard. So what I'll tell you is, I know you asked for a quick tip and I'm rambling, and I so appreciate you giving me the chance. Here's the analogy. In yoga, if you do tree pose, you've got your hands up and you're standing on one leg. And they say, don't think about balancing on one foot. Think about reaching for the sky. Comfort is the same thing. If you're afraid of falling over, if you're afraid of tripping into this like black hole of grief, don't think about where you're anchored. Think about what you're reaching for. You're reaching for comfort. You're reaching for joy. So ask about the person's name. Ask about a favorite memory. Ask about a favorite song. Something that has a joyous component to it.
I love that. That's great. Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining Stacey and me today. This has been a great conversation. We'll do some crying after the show, because none of us like to cry in front of people.
I got my Kleenex next to me. Yeah,
it's probably one of our people weaknesses, right? Yeah. Where can people find out more about Comfort Communications and you and what you guys are doing?
Easiest place to start is my LinkedIn profile, in/Seiden, Seiden, and all the requisite links and information are anchored right there.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank our producers, the Brand Method Media Group. I want to also thank our marketing team who will make this snazzy and get it out there to our listeners. I want to thank you for tuning in today. That's all the time we have for this episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed this episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you'd leave us a review, or you just want to reach out. So drop us a line, schedule some time to chat. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.